I never thought a hole in my backyard would lead to threatening legal notices, screaming matches in public meetings, and eventually a lawsuit that would expose years of corruption. But here we are. My name is Nathan Quill, and I'm a software engineer living in Henderson, Nevada. I bought my modest 3-bedroom house in the Sunset Ridge community about 2 years ago. The neighborhood was nice enough, with its cookie-cutter homes painted in approved shades of beige and tan, manicured lawns that all looked the same, and an HOA that seemed mostly concerned with making sure nobody parked their car on the street overnight. I could live with that, or so I thought. The trouble started in March, when I received a notice from Henderson County's Stormwater Management Division. The letter, printed on official county letterhead, informed me that due to new regulations stemming from federal water quality mandates, all residential properties in my area were required to implement low-impact development features to reduce stormwater runoff. The county was cracking down because the Las Vegas Valley had been experiencing serious flooding issues, and our neighborhood's concrete-heavy landscape was contributing to the problem. The notice gave me 90 days to install an approved stormwater management feature. The options included rain gardens, bios walls, permeable pavement, or rain barrels. After doing some research and getting quotes from contractors, I decided on a rain garden. It would cost about $3,000, be relatively low maintenance, and actually look pretty nice with native plants and flowers. The county even provided a list of pre-approved designs and recommended contractors. I hired a company called Desert Rain Landscaping, run by a guy named Marcus, who specialized in exactly this kind of work. He showed me photos of other rain gardens he had installed, explained how they worked to filter pollutants and reduce runoff, and assured me that everything would meet county specifications. We scheduled the installation for early May. "You might want to check with your HOA first," Marcus mentioned as we finalized the contract, "just to give them a heads up." I waved him off. "It's a county mandate. They can't say no to something the county requires." Marcus raised his eyebrows but did not argue. Looking back, I should have listened to his skepticism. The installation took 3 days. Marcus and his crew dug a depression in my front yard, about 15 feet long and 8 feet wide, positioned to catch runoff from my driveway and the slight slope of my property. They installed a specialized soil mix, added river rocks for drainage, and planted native species like desert marigolds, purple sage, and red yucca. When they finished, it actually looked beautiful, a small oasis of color in a sea of identical beige houses and green grass lawns. I submitted my compliance documentation to the county, complete with photos, contractor certification, and the design specifications. 2 weeks later, I received confirmation that my property was now in full compliance with the stormwater ordinance. I felt pretty good about the whole thing. I had followed the law, improved my property, and done something positive for the environment. Then I got the letter from the HOA. It arrived on a Tuesday, in a crisp white envelope with the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association logo printed in the corner. Inside was a violation notice signed by someone named Deborah Patterson, HOA president. The letter informed me that my unauthorized landscaping modification violated the community's architectural review guidelines, specifically sections 4.2 and 7.8, which required prior approval for any changes to front yard landscaping and prohibited irregularities in lawn appearance and continuity. The fine was $500, due within 30 days. If I failed to pay and restore my front yard to its original condition, the fine would increase by $250 per month until compliance was achieved. Furthermore, the HOA reserved the right to place a lien on my property for unpaid fines. I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each reading. This was insane. The county had required me to install the rain garden. I had documentation, permits, everything. How could the HOA possibly fine me for following the law? I called the HOA management company, a faceless corporate entity called Premier Community Services. After navigating an automated phone tree for 10 minutes, I finally reached a human being who identified herself as Tracy. "I'm calling about a violation notice I received," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I installed a rain garden because Henderson County mandated it for stormwater management. I have all the documentation showing this was required by law." Tracy put me on hold for 5 minutes. When she came back, her voice was professionally neutral. "Sir, regardless of county requirements, you still need HOA approval for any exterior modifications. You should have submitted an architectural review application before beginning the work. But the county gave me 90 days to comply. I didn't have time to wait for HOA approval, which I know can take months. That's not our concern, sir. The HOA governing documents are legally binding. You agreed to them when you purchased your property. So what am I supposed to do? The county requires the rain garden. If I remove it, I'll be in violation of county code. You'll need to take that up with the HOA board. There's a meeting next Thursday at 7 p.m. at the community center. You can address the board during the homeowner forum." I hung up feeling frustrated but determined. This was clearly just a misunderstanding. Once I explained the situation to the board and showed them the county documentation, they would have to see reason. Nobody could expect me to violate county law just to satisfy HOA preferences. I spent the next week preparing for the meeting. I printed copies of the county ordinance, my compliance certification, photos of the rain garden, and information about stormwater management requirements. I even found case law showing that HOA rules could not supersede government regulations. I felt prepared and confident. The Thursday meeting was held in a bland community center room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. About 20 homeowners were scattered around the space, most looking bored or resigned. At the front table sat 5 board members, with name placards identifying them. Deborah Patterson sat in the center, a woman in her mid-50s with perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive-looking jewelry, and an expression that suggested she had just smelled something unpleasant. Deborah called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. They went through routine business, approving last month's minutes, discussing the budget for pool maintenance, and debating whether to install speed bumps on Sunset Ridge Boulevard. Finally, she announced the homeowner forum. "We'll hear from residents who have issues to bring before the board. Please keep comments to 3 minutes or less." Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. "I believe we have someone here regarding a violation notice." I stood up, gathering my papers. "Yes, that's me. Nathan Quill, 847 Desert Bloom Court. Approach the podium, please." I walked to the front, very aware of everyone watching me. I set my papers down and began. "I received a violation notice about my rain garden, but I want to explain the situation. In March, Henderson County issued a mandate requiring all properties in this area to install low-impact development features for stormwater management. I have the county notice right here." I held up the document. The county gave me 90 days to comply, so I hired a licensed contractor and installed an approved rain garden. I submitted all the required documentation and received confirmation that I'm in full compliance with county law. Deborah's expression had not changed. Did you submit an architectural review application to the HOA before making this modification? No, because the county mandate had a strict deadline. The county would have fined me if I didn't comply within 90 days. HOA architectural reviews can take months. That's not our problem, Mr. Quill. When you purchased your property, you signed a legal agreement to abide by our community guidelines. Those guidelines clearly state that all exterior modifications require prior board approval. I understand that, but this wasn't optional. The county law supersedes HOA regulations. I brought case law that supports this. I shuffled through my papers. A man to Deborah's left, whose nameplate read Richard Chen, Vice President, leaned forward. Actually, Mr. Quill, HOA covenants are private contracts. They can be more restrictive than government regulations. But I can't violate county law to satisfy HOA preferences, I argued. The county will fine me if I remove the rain garden. Deborah cut in, her voice sharp. Then you should have thought of that before making unauthorized changes. Our community has standards. We can't have people just digging holes in their front yards and calling it landscaping. It's not just a hole. It's an engineered stormwater management system designed by professionals and approved by the county. I could feel my frustration building. I have photos, specifications, everything. The board has reviewed the photos. It's an eyesore that disrupts the uniformity of our neighborhood. The architectural guidelines exist for a reason, to protect property values. Protecting the watershed protects property values too, I shot back. What do you think happens to property values when the whole area floods because nobody manages stormwater properly? Deborah's face flushed slightly. Mr. Quill, you're out of order. The board has made its decision. The fine stands. You have 30 days to either pay the fine and submit a retroactive architectural review application, or remove the rain garden and restore your lawn. This matter is closed. This is ridiculous. You can't just ignore county law. Security, please escort Mr. Quill out if he continues to be disruptive. I looked around and saw an older man in a security uniform standing by the door, looking uncomfortable. I took a deep breath, gathered my papers, and walked back to my seat. I was not going to give Deborah the satisfaction of having me removed. The meeting continued with other business, but I could not focus on any of it. My mind was racing, trying to figure out my next move. When the meeting finally adjourned, I approached Deborah directly. Mrs. Patterson, can we discuss this reasonably? I'm happy to submit a retroactive application, but the fine doesn't make sense when I was following county law. She looked at me with cold eyes. Mr. Quill, the fine is not just about the unauthorized work. It's about sending a message. We can't have homeowners thinking they can do whatever they want and ask forgiveness later. Standards matter. If we let this slide, soon everyone will be installing whatever they please, and our community will look like a slum. A rain garden with native plants is not a slum, I said, keeping my voice level. It's environmentally responsible landscaping. It's a muddy depression that ruins the aesthetic cohesion of Desert Bloom Court. I drive past your house every day and it's embarrassing. What will visitors think? They'll think someone actually cares about water conservation in the desert. Her expression hardened. The fine stands. Good evening, Mr. Quill. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the tile floor. I left the community center feeling angry and defeated. This was not going to be resolved through reasonable discussion. Over the next few days, I did more research. I contacted Henderson County's Code Enforcement Office and spoke to a supervisor named Jennifer. I explained the situation, and she was sympathetic. Yeah, we've had a few cases like this, she said. HOAs don't like change, even when it's required by law. Technically, the county code takes precedence. You're in compliance with our requirements, and that's what matters from a legal standpoint. Can you send something to the HOA confirming that? I can send a letter explaining the ordinance and confirming your compliance. Whether they pay attention to it is another matter. Jennifer sent the letter within a week. It was professionally worded, but clear. Henderson County Ordinance 2024-18 required low-impact development features on residential properties. My rain garden met all specifications, and removal of the feature would place my property in violation of county code. She copied the letter to both the HOA board and Premier Community Services. I thought this would settle things. I was wrong. Another letter arrived from the HOA, this time informing me that my violation had now accrued an additional $250 in late fees, bringing the total to $750. The letter made no mention of the county's correspondence. I called Premier Community Services again and got Tracy on the line. "Did you receive the letter from Henderson County?" I asked. "We did, Mr. Quill. However, the HOA maintains that you still violated the architectural review process. The fine is for procedural violation, not for the rain garden itself." That's not what the original violation notice said. It specifically called it an unauthorized landscaping modification and cited sections about lawn appearance. The board has clarified its position. You failed to follow proper procedures. Because I was following county law, what was I supposed to do? Violate the law while waiting months for HOA approval? You could have requested an expedited review. Does the HOA even offer expedited reviews? There was a pause. I'll have to check the guidelines. Let me guess, they don't. Mr. Quill, I'm just the management company representative. I don't make these decisions. If you want to dispute the fine, you'll need to request a hearing with the board. I requested the hearing in writing, citing the county ordinance and demanding that the fine be dismissed. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, things got worse. I started receiving complaints from neighbors, not many, but enough to be annoying. Someone left a note on my door saying my swamp was breeding mosquitoes, which was absurd because the rain garden was designed specifically to drain and not hold standing water. Another neighbor, a woman named Carol from 2 houses down, stopped me while I was getting my mail. "Nathan, I heard about your issue with the HOA," she said, her voice sympathetic. "Between you and me, I think Deborah is being ridiculous, but you know how she is." "I'm just trying to follow the law," I said. Carol glanced around as if worried someone might overhear. "Deborah takes this HOA stuff very seriously. She's been president for 6 years, and she runs it like her personal kingdom. Last year, she fined the Johnsons $1,500 because they painted their shutters the wrong shade of gray. The approved color was agreeable gray and they used repose gray. Nobody could tell the difference except Deborah. That's insane." "It is, but that's Deborah. She's gotten worse since she retired. The HOA is her whole life now. My advice, just pay the fine and submit the application." "It's not worth the fight." I shook my head. "I'm not paying a fine for following county law. That's the principle of it." Carol sighed. "I get it, I really do, but Deborah doesn't back down. She'll make your life miserable." She was right about that. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 more violation notices for increasingly petty things. My trash can was left out 45 minutes past the pickup window. My front door mat was burgundy instead of an approved neutral color. My mailbox had a slight rust spot that needed immediate attention. Each violation came with a $100 fine. It was obvious harassment, and it was working. I felt constantly anxious, wondering what absurd rule I would violate next just by existing in my own home. The hearing finally arrived. It was held in the same community center room, but this time it was just me, the 5 board members, and a representative from Premier Community Services. The setup felt deliberately intimidating, like being called to the principal's office. Deborah sat in the center again, flanked by the other board members. She opened a folder and reviewed some papers before looking up at me. "Mr. Quill, you've requested a hearing to dispute your violation fine regarding unauthorized landscaping. The board will hear your statement, then render a decision. You have 10 minutes. I had prepared extensively." I presented the county ordinance, the compliance certification, the letter from county code enforcement, and documentation showing that I had acted in good faith to comply with the law within the required time frame. I explained that the rain garden was not optional, that removing it would violate county code, and that HOA regulations could not legally require me to break the law. "Furthermore," I said, "I've received multiple additional violation notices in the past 2 weeks for minor issues that were never problems before. This feels like targeted harassment for exercising my legal rights." Deborah's expression remained neutral throughout my presentation. When I finished, she consulted briefly with the other board members in whispered conversation. "Mr. Quill," she said finally, "the board appreciates your presentation. However, our position remains unchanged. The HOA governing documents clearly require architectural approval for exterior modifications. You failed to obtain that approval. The fact that you were complying with county law does not excuse your failure to follow HOA procedures." "What procedure should I have followed?" I demanded. "The county gave me 90 days. Should I have just violated county law and accepted those fines instead?" Richard Chen spoke up. "You could have requested a variance or emergency approval." "There's no emergency approval process in the HOA guidelines," I checked. "You could have requested one," Deborah said smoothly. "The board has discretion to expedite matters when necessary. I'm supposed to just know that, even though it's not written anywhere, and trust that you would have actually expedited it. Your lack of communication with the board is not our responsibility." I felt my temper rising. "This is absurd. You're manufacturing reasons to fine me because you don't like how the rain garden looks. Just admit that's what this is about." Deborah's eyes flashed. "Mr. Quill, your attitude is not helping your case. The board has made its decision. The fine stands, and it will continue to accrue monthly penalties until the violation is resolved. Additionally, the fines for your other violations also stand. Your current total is $1,050. I'm not paying that. Then we'll place a lien on your property. Eventually, we can foreclose to collect the debt." The casualness with which she said it shocked me. "You'd foreclose on my house over a rain garden that the county requires." "We'd foreclose over your refusal to pay legitimate fines and follow community rules. It's that simple." I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. "You know what? I'll see you in court." Deborah actually smiled slightly. "That's your right, Mr. Quill. But I should warn you, the HOA has significant legal resources and insurance coverage for litigation. Do you?" I left without responding, my mind already racing ahead. I needed a lawyer. Finding an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes was harder than I expected. Most real estate lawyers in Henderson dealt primarily with transactions, not litigation. I finally found a firm called Morrison and Associates that had experience with HOA cases. I met with an attorney named Lisa Morrison, a sharp woman in her 40s who listened to my story with growing interest. "This is a good case," she said after I finished. "County ordinances absolutely supersede HOA regulations. The problem is that HOA litigation can be expensive and time-consuming. The HOA knows this, which is why they're being aggressive. Most homeowners just give up and pay. What are my options? We can file suit to have the fines dismissed and potentially seek an injunction preventing the HOA from further harassment. We could also countersue for legal fees and damages if we can prove bad faith. But litigation like this can easily cost $20,000 to $30,000 if it goes to trial. I felt my stomach drop. I don't have that kind of money sitting around. There might be another approach. Nevada has fairly strong laws protecting homeowners from HOA overreach. We could start by sending a strongly worded legal letter, making it clear that we're prepared to litigate and that their position is legally indefensible. Sometimes that's enough to make them back down, especially if we point out the potential for them to pay your attorney fees if they lose. That seemed more manageable. Lisa drafted a letter that laid out the legal problems with the HOA's position in detail. She cited Nevada revised statutes showing that HOAs could not enforce rules that conflicted with government regulations. She pointed out that the county ordinance was mandatory, not optional. She noted that the additional violation notices appeared to be retaliatory and could constitute harassment. And she made clear that if the HOA continued to pursue collection actions, we would file suit and seek attorney fees, damages, and an injunction. The letter was 8 pages of legal firepower, and it cost me $1,500. Money I really did not want to spend, but it seemed better than paying bogus fines. Lisa sent the letter via certified mail to both the HOA board and Premier Community Services. Then we waited. A week passed with no response. Then 2 weeks. I started to think maybe the letter had worked, that the HOA had realized they were in the wrong and would quietly drop the matter. Then, I received a letter from an attorney representing the HOA. The law firm was called Blackwell & Stone, and their letter was even longer than Lisa's. It argued that HOA covenants were private contracts with broad enforceability, that architectural review requirements were standard and reasonable, and that my failure to follow procedures constituted a material breach of the governing documents. The letter demanded payment of all outstanding fines, now totaling $1,300 with additional late fees within 15 days. If payment was not received, they would initiate foreclosure proceedings. They're bluffing, Lisa said when I showed her the letter. Foreclosure for $1,300 would be absurdly expensive for them, and the optics would be terrible. But we need to call their bluff. I recommend we file suit first. That puts us in the driver's seat and forces them to respond to our claims rather than the other way around. How much will that cost? I can do it for a flat fee of $5,000 to file and handle initial proceedings. If it goes to trial, we'll need to discuss additional fees, but I'm confident we can win summary judgment before it gets that far. $5,000. I thought about my savings account, about whether this was really worth it. Then I thought about Deborah Patterson's smug expression and her threat to foreclose on my home. I thought about the principle of the thing, about whether HOAs should be allowed to ignore the law and bully homeowners into submission. Let's do it, I said. Lisa filed the lawsuit in Henderson District Court 3 days later. We sued the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association and Premier Community Services for declaratory relief, requesting that the court declare the fines invalid and issue an injunction preventing enforcement. We also included claims for harassment and bad faith, seeking attorney fees and damages. The lawsuit made a small splash in the local news. A reporter from the Henderson Times contacted me for an interview, and I told the whole story. The article ran with the headline, "Homeowner Battles HOA Over County-Mandated Rain Garden." It included quotes from me, a photo of the rain garden, and attempts to reach the HOA for comment that went unanswered. The article generated a surprising amount of community support. I received emails and messages from neighbors and other Henderson residents who had their own HOA horror stories. Several people mentioned Deborah Patterson specifically, describing her as a tyrant who used the HOA to exercise petty power over her neighbors. One former board member told me that Deborah had driven off anyone who disagreed with her, creating a board of yes men who rubber-stamped her decisions. The case moved forward through the court system. The HOA filed a response denying all allegations and counterclaiming for the unpaid fines plus attorney fees. We exchanged discovery requests, requiring both sides to produce documents and answer written questions under oath. The discovery process was enlightening. Through document requests, we obtained years of HOA records, including board meeting minutes, financial statements, and violation enforcement histories. What we found was disturbing. The HOA had filed over 300 violation notices in the past 2 years, generating more than $200,000 in fines. However, the enforcement was wildly inconsistent. Some homeowners received violations for minor issues, while identical violations by other homeowners went ignored. I noticed a pattern. Homeowners who attended board meetings and questioned decisions tended to receive far more violation notices than those who stayed quiet and paid whatever fines were assessed. Even more interesting, the financial records showed that Deborah Patterson's own property had several violations on record, but all the associated fines had been mysteriously waived or reduced to zero. Richard Chen, the vice president, had similar treatment. It looked like selective enforcement designed to punish dissenters and reward allies. Lisa was delighted when she saw the records. This is exactly what we need. Selective enforcement shows bad faith, and the pattern of targeting homeowners who challenge the board supports your harassment claim. This goes beyond just the rain garden issue. We filed an amended complaint adding allegations of discriminatory enforcement and seeking class action status on behalf of other homeowners who had been unfairly fined. Lisa suggested we might be able to expand this into something bigger, potentially recovering improper fines for dozens of homeowners. That got the HOA's attention. Their attorney, a slick guy named Gordon Blackwell, requested a settlement conference. We met at Lisa's office on a Tuesday afternoon in August. Gordon was exactly what I expected. Expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, condescending smile. He sat across from me and Lisa with Deborah Patterson and a representative from Premier Community Services. "Let's cut to the chase," Gordon said. "My clients are willing to waive the fines related to the rain garden issue if Mr. Quill agrees to drop the lawsuit and sign a release." "Not good enough," Lisa said immediately. "We want all fines against Mr. Quill waived, including the retaliatory violations. We also want written confirmation that the rain garden is approved and no further action will be taken regarding it." "The other violations were legitimate," Deborah interjected. "They have nothing to do with the rain garden." "They have everything to do with it," I said. "I never received a single violation notice before the rain garden. Then suddenly I'm violating rules left and right for things that were never problems before. Come on." Gordon held up a hand. "Let's stay professional. Mrs. Patterson, let me handle this." He turned back to Lisa. "We can agree to waive all current fines and approve the rain garden retroactively. In exchange, Mr. Quill drops the lawsuit and agrees not to pursue further claims." "What about the other homeowners who were improperly fined?" Lisa asked. "That's not relevant to this case." It became relevant when we amended to include discriminatory enforcement claims and sought class certification. Gordon's jaw tightened slightly. The HOA maintains that all enforcement actions were proper and justified. But in the interest of resolving this matter efficiently, we're willing to conduct an internal review of recent enforcement decisions and consider adjustments where appropriate. "That's meaningless," Lisa said. "You need to commit to specific remedies." The negotiation went back and forth for 2 hours. Every time we seemed close to an agreement, someone would raise a new issue or object to proposed language. Deborah's hostility was palpable throughout. She clearly hated being in this position, being forced to negotiate with someone she considered beneath her. Finally, we reached an impasse. Gordon wanted us to drop all claims and accept waivers of the fines against me personally. Lisa insisted on broader relief for other homeowners and wanted the HOA to pay our attorney fees. Neither side would budge. "I guess we'll see you in court," Lisa said, gathering her papers. Gordon looked annoyed but not particularly worried. "Judge Kellerman doesn't like HOA cases. He usually tells both sides to work it out. You're wasting everyone's time and money. Then you should have made a reasonable settlement offer." We left the conference with no resolution. The case would proceed to court. The next several months were frustrating. The legal system moved at a glacial pace. Motions were filed, hearings were held, continuances were granted. Meanwhile, I lived in a state of constant low-level stress, wondering how much this was ultimately going to cost me and whether it would all be worth it. The HOA continued its petty harassment in ways that technically did not violate the court's preliminary orders. I received passive-aggressive letters about community standards and neighborhood pride. Someone filed an anonymous complaint with the county about my rain garden, triggering an inspection. The inspector confirmed it was perfectly compliant and actually commended the installation quality, but it was still a hassle. I also noticed that some neighbors started avoiding me. Carol, who had been sympathetic before, stopped making eye contact when we crossed paths. I overheard someone at the grocery store refer to me as that guy suing the HOA, and the tone was not admiring. Some people saw me as a troublemaker disrupting the community rather than someone standing up for his rights, but others were supportive. A couple named Frank and Maria, who lived on the next street over, invited me to dinner and shared their own story of being fined $1,200 for installing solar panels that were explicitly permitted by Nevada law. They had paid the fine rather than fight it because they did not have the resources for a legal battle. "If you win this, you're a hero to a lot of us," Frank said. "Deborah has gotten away with this stuff for too long." The case finally went before Judge Kellerman in January for a hearing on our motion for summary judgment. Summary judgment would mean we won without a full trial because the legal issues were clear-cut and undisputed. Lisa was confident we had a strong case. Judge Kellerman was a gray-haired man in his 60s, with a reputation for being no-nonsense and impatient with what he considered frivolous litigation. The hearing was held in a wood-paneled courtroom that felt cold and intimidating. Lisa argued our position clearly and forcefully. The county ordinance mandated the rain garden. HOA rules could not supersede mandatory government regulations. The enforcement was selective and retaliatory. The law was on our side. Gordon countered that HOA covenants were private contracts that homeowners agreed to voluntarily. The architectural review process was reasonable and standard. My failure to follow procedures was a legitimate violation regardless of the county mandate. He downplayed the other violations as unrelated matters. Judge Kellerman listened to both sides, asked a few pointed questions, and then took the matter under advisement. "I'll issue a written ruling within 30 days, he said, banging his gavel. The waiting was excruciating. I tried to stay busy with work and normal life, but the case was always in the back of my mind. Every time my phone rang or email dinged, I wondered if it was Lisa with news. 28 days after the hearing, Lisa called. I answered on the first ring. "We won," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Seriously, Judge Kellerman issued a comprehensive ruling. He found that the county stormwater ordinance supersedes HOA regulations as a matter of law, that the fines were invalid, and that the pattern of violations constituted harassment. He dismissed all fines, issued an injunction preventing the HOA from taking any action related to the rain garden, and ordered the HOA to pay your attorney fees. I felt a wave of relief so intense I had to sit down. All of it, every fine, every fine. And here's the best part. The judge specifically found that the HOA acted in bad faith by continuing to pursue the fines after being informed of the county mandate. That's what triggered the attorney fees award. How much are the attorney fees? I'll submit a detailed accounting, but based on the hours I've logged, probably around $18,000. The HOA has to pay that, I laughed, almost giddy with relief. Deborah is going to lose her mind, probably, but there's more. The judge also ordered the HOA to review all violation enforcement actions from the past 2 years and provide written justification for each fine over $100. If homeowners want to challenge specific fines based on this ruling, they can file individual motions. Essentially, he's opened the door for other homeowners to get relief without requiring a separate class action. This was better than I had hoped for. Not only had I won my case, but the judge had created a mechanism for other victims of the HOA's abuse to get justice. Lisa, thank you. Seriously. I know this was a pain, but you did amazing work. It was a good case, and you were right to fight it. These HOA boards need to learn they can't just steamroll homeowners. The ruling made bigger news than the initial lawsuit. The Henderson Times ran another article, this time with the headline "Judge Slams HOA for Invalid Fines, Orders Fee Payment." The article included excerpts from Judge Kellerman's ruling, which contained some strongly worded language about HOAs respecting the law and not abusing their authority. Within a week, I received messages from 7 other homeowners in Sunset Ridge who wanted to challenge their fines. Lisa agreed to help them file motions at a reduced rate, and I connected her with everyone who reached out. The fallout for the HOA board was significant. A group of homeowners organized a recall petition to remove Deborah Patterson from the board. Nevada law allows HOA members to recall board members with a petition signed by a certain percentage of homeowners, and the required threshold was met within 2 weeks. The recall election was held at a special meeting in February. The community center was packed with homeowners, many of whom I had never seen at a regular meeting. The energy in the room was electric, angry, and focused. Deborah tried to maintain control, but she was shouted down when she attempted to defend her record. Homeowner after homeowner stood up to share stories of ridiculous fines, selective enforcement, and petty harassment. The vote was not close. Deborah was recalled by a margin of 73-18. Richard Chen and 2 other board members resigned the same night rather than face similar recalls. Only one board member, a mild-mannered accountant named Steve, remained. He had apparently been a dissenting voice on the board, but was overruled by Deborah on most votes, An interim board was elected that night, made up of homeowners who were fed up with the old regime. One of them was Frank, the guy who had been fined for his solar panels. The new board immediately suspended all pending violation enforcement actions pending a comprehensive review. I ran into Deborah one more time, about a week after the recall election. I was at the gas station filling up my car when she pulled in across from me. Our eyes met, and for a moment I thought she might just ignore me. Instead, she walked over. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You've destroyed this community." I looked at her carefully. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished without her gavel and her title. "I just wanted to follow the law, Deborah. That's all this ever was. You humiliated me. You cost the HOA thousands of dollars in legal fees. You turned neighbors against each other. No, you did that. You treated the HOA like your personal kingdom and punished anyone who questioned you. I just stood up for myself." Her face flushed red. "You people don't understand what it takes to maintain standards. You want to let everything go to hell, turn this place into a dump." I was trying to protect property values. By fining people for following county law, by selectively enforcing rules based on who you liked, that's not protecting property values. That's abuse of power. She opened her mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. She turned and walked back to her car, her back rigid with anger. I watched her drive away and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction at winning, but sadness that it had to come to this. The new HOA board moved quickly to make changes. They revised the governing documents to include an expedited review process for modifications required by law. They established clear, objective criteria for violations and committed to consistent enforcement across all properties. They also refunded fines to 17 homeowners who had been improperly charged over the past 2 years, totaling more than $40,000. The board hired a new management company, firing Premier Community Services for their role in enabling Deborah's behavior. The new company was smaller and locally owned, with a focus on customer service rather than aggressive enforcement. In March, I received a formal letter from the new board, signed by the new president, a retired teacher named Margaret. The letter apologized for the previous board's actions, confirmed that my rain garden was fully approved, and thanked me for standing up against improper enforcement. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot. My rain garden thrived through the spring and summer. The native plants bloomed beautifully, and I noticed that it actually did a great job managing water during the occasional desert rainstorms. Several neighbors commented on how nice it looked, and a few even asked for the contractor's information because they wanted to install their own rain gardens. In April, Henderson County sent a notice recognizing my property as a model example of low-impact development and asking if they could include photos in their educational materials for other homeowners. I agreed, amused by the irony. What had started as a legal nightmare had turned into a showcase for good environmental practices. The total cost to the HOA for their stubborn refusal to back down was substantial. Beyond the $18,000 in attorney fees they had to pay me, they spent at least $30,000 on their own legal costs. The refunded fines added another $40,000. The cost of hiring a new management company and implementing reforms added more. All told, Deborah's vendetta against my rain garden probably cost the HOA close to $100,000. The legal battle also damaged the HOA's reputation enough that 2 families decided to sell and move out of Sunset Ridge rather than deal with the drama. Property values actually dipped slightly for a few months, until the new board's reforms started to rebuild trust. I stayed in contact with Lisa Morrison, who told me that she had seen an uptick in HOA dispute cases following the publicity around my lawsuit. Other homeowners in other communities were emboldened to fight back against unreasonable boards, and some were using Judge Kellerman's ruling as precedent. "You started something," Lisa said during a phone call in May. "HOAs around Nevada are taking notice. Some are actually reforming their practices proactively because they don't want to end up like Sunset Ridge." That felt good. The fight had been expensive and stressful, but if it led to meaningful change beyond just my own situation, it was worth it. In June, I attended my first HOA meeting under the new board. The atmosphere was completely different. Margaret ran the meeting efficiently, but without Deborah's iron fist. Homeowners felt comfortable asking questions and raising concerns without fear of retribution. The board actually listened and responded thoughtfully. During the homeowner forum section, I stood up to speak. "I just want to thank the new board for the reforms you've implemented," I said. "A year ago, I was facing foreclosure over a rain garden that county law required me to install. Now we have clear processes, fair enforcement, and a board that respects homeowners' rights. This is what an HOA should be." There was scattered applause. Margaret smiled and nodded. "Thank you, Nathan. Your willingness to stand up for what was right helped create the momentum for change." We're all grateful. As I sat down, I caught sight of Carol, my neighbor who had previously avoided me. She was smiling and gave me a subtle thumbs up. Things had definitely changed. The rain garden continued to be a conversation starter. I noticed people slowing down when they drove past my house, and several times I came home to find neighbors standing on the sidewalk examining it. One Saturday morning, a couple walking their dog stopped to ask questions about the installation process and maintenance requirements. "We've been thinking about doing something similar," the woman said. "Especially after seeing all the publicity about your case. It seems like the right thing to do for the environment." I gave them Marcus's contact information and encouraged them to go for it. Within 2 months, 3 other homes on my street had installed rain gardens or bios walls. The neighborhood was actually starting to look more environmentally diverse and interesting than the monotonous grass lawns that had dominated before. In August, I was contacted by a local news station that wanted to do a follow-up story about the case and its impact on HOA reform. They sent a reporter and camera crew to interview me in front of my rain garden. "When you first installed this, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this?" the reporter asked. I laughed. "Not at all. I just wanted to follow the county ordinance and avoid getting fined by the government. I never expected the HOA would fight so hard against something that was legally required." What would you say to other homeowners dealing with unreasonable HOAs? Document everything. Know your rights. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, but also pick your battles carefully. I got lucky because the law was clearly on my side. Not every case is that straightforward. But if an HOA is genuinely violating your rights or breaking the law, don't just accept it because fighting seems hard. The story aired that evening and was shared widely on social media. My phone buzzed with messages from friends and former colleagues who had seen it. Some people from other states even reached out, asking about the legal strategies we had used, because they were facing similar situations with their own HOAs. The experience taught me a lot about local government, legal systems, and the importance of community involvement. Before all this, I had been a passive homeowner who paid my dues and ignored HOA meetings. Now, I attended regularly and even volunteered for a committee reviewing the governing documents to identify other provisions that might conflict with current laws. In September, Nearly a year and a half after I first installed the rain garden, I received a final piece of mail related to the case. It was a check from the HOA for $18,437.62, representing the full attorney fees award plus interest. I stared at the check for a long moment, feeling a sense of closure. I deposited the check and immediately wrote one to Lisa Morrison for the $5,000 I had paid her upfront, which had not been included in the court-ordered fees. Then I took Maria and Frank out to dinner to celebrate, since they had been such strong supporters throughout the ordeal. "To fighting the good fight," Frank said, raising his glass in a toast. We clinked glasses, and I felt genuinely happy. The whole experience had been stressful, and at times felt overwhelming, but we had won. More importantly, we had changed things for the better. The rain garden sat in my front yard, thriving with purple sage blooms and bright desert marigolds, a testament to standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. Every time I looked at it, I remembered Deborah's face when she threatened to foreclose on my house, and I felt satisfaction knowing that her abuse of power had ultimately led to her own downfall. The neighborhood kids sometimes asked me about the special garden, and I would explain how it helped filter water and protect the environment. One little girl from down the street drew a picture of it for a school project about environmental conservation. Her mother brought me a copy, and I hung it on my refrigerator. Life in Sunset Ridge slowly returned to a comfortable normal, but it was a better normal than before. The HOA still enforced reasonable rules about actual problems like unmaintained properties or legitimate safety issues. But the petty tyranny was gone. Homeowners felt respected rather than bullied. The community was healthier for it. I kept in touch with several people who had reached out during the case, forming friendships based on our shared experiences with HOA overreach. We joked about starting a support group, but never quite got around to it. The new board was doing such a good job that there was not much need for activism anymore. In November, Henderson County published a guide for homeowners about complying with the stormwater ordinance. My rain garden was featured prominently with photos and a brief case study. The guide specifically mentioned that HOAs could not prohibit county-mandated improvements and referenced Judge Kellerman's ruling. The county was using my case to educate others and prevent similar conflicts. The weather turned cooler, and the rain garden prepared for winter dormancy. The native plants were well adapted to the desert climate and required minimal care. I spent a Saturday afternoon cleaning up fallen leaves and trimming back some of the growth, enjoying the simple satisfaction of maintaining something I had fought so hard to keep. As I worked, my neighbor from across the street, an older man named Robert who I had rarely spoken to before, walked over. "Nathan, I owe you an apology," he said, looking uncomfortable. "When all this started, I thought you were being difficult. I didn't understand what Deborah was doing. I voted against the recall at first." "It's okay," I said. "It was complicated." "No, it's not okay. I let her get away with that behavior for years because it was easier than standing up to her. You did what was right, and it cost you a lot of stress and money. I should have supported you from the start." We shook hands, and Robert went back to his house. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. People were recognizing what had happened and taking responsibility for their own roles in enabling the old board's behavior. December brought the HOA's annual meeting and budget approval. The meeting was well attended, with homeowners actually engaged in the process. The budget included line items for legal reserve funds and compliance reviews, measures designed to prevent future problems. It passed overwhelmingly. During the meeting, Margaret announced that she would not seek re-election as president the following year. She had agreed to serve during the transition, but wanted to step back and let others lead going forward. There was genuine sadness in the room. She had done an excellent job steering the community through a difficult period. Elections were held, and Frank was elected as the new president. I was genuinely happy for him. He had the right temperament for the job, firm but fair, willing to listen but able to make decisions. The community was in good hands. As the year came to a close, I reflected on everything that had happened. What started as a simple effort to comply with county law had turned into a legal battle, a community uprising, and ultimately a positive transformation of the neighborhood. It was exhausting and expensive, but I would do it again if I had to. The rain garden remained, a constant reminder that sometimes standing up for what's right means fighting battles you never wanted or expected. Every spring it would bloom again, beautiful and functional, a small victory against arbitrary authority and petty tyranny. I learned that change is possible, even against entrenched power, but it requires courage, persistence, and often resources that not everyone has. I was lucky in many ways. I had the financial means to hire a lawyer, the time to see the fight through, and a legal position that was clearly defensible. Not everyone facing HOA abuse would have those advantages. That awareness motivated me to stay involved. I joined the new board's compliance committee and helped develop guidelines that protected homeowners from arbitrary enforcement while still maintaining reasonable community standards. We created an appeals process that gave homeowners a fair chance to contest violations before fines were assessed. We established transparent criteria for enforcement so everyone knew what to expect. These changes were not revolutionary, but they mattered. They represented a shift from viewing homeowners as subjects to be controlled to viewing them as members of a community deserving respect and fair treatment. In January, as the new year began, I stood in my front yard looking at the rain garden. The desert winter was mild, and some of the hardier plants were already showing signs of new growth. In a few months, it would be in full bloom again, a cycle of renewal that felt appropriate. My phone buzzed with a message from Lisa Morrison. A newspaper wanted to do a one-year retrospective on the case and its impact on HOA governance in Nevada. Was I interested in participating? I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. The fight might be over, but the story was still being written. Other homeowners in other communities would face similar challenges, and maybe my experience could help them navigate those waters. If standing up to Deborah Patterson and the Sunset Ridge HOA meant that fewer people would have to endure similar harassment, then every moment of stress and every dollar spent was worth it. The rain garden bloomed that spring more beautifully than ever, a garden that county law required and that I had fought to keep, now a symbol of resilience, environmental responsibility, and the principle that even the smallest homeowner can stand up to abuse of power and win. Every time I walked past it, I felt pride not just in the garden itself, but in what it represented. Proof that doing the right thing, even when it is hard, can lead to meaningful change.